Commander Zalthek floated in the crystal-clear waters of his observation chamber, his translucent fins rippling with mild interest. The massive viewing screen before him displayed a small blue planet, orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. His gill slits fluttered as he processed the data streaming across his console. Another primitive world, he muttered to his science officer Velira, whose bioluminescent patches pulsed in agreement, though this one seems to have an unusually active communication network. The Zephyrian Empire had been expanding across the galaxy for over 3,000 cycles, absorbing countless worlds and species into their domain. Most surrendered without resistance once they witnessed the Empire's technological superiority. Others required brief military demonstrations. Very few warranted extended study. Velira's webbed fingers danced across her control panel, calling up the preliminary scans. The planet is designated as Sol 3 by its inhabitants. They call it Earth. Initial observations show a single sentient species calling themselves humans. Humans, Zalthek repeated, tasting the alien word. And their capabilities? Extremely limited, Commander. They possess crude chemical propulsion, basic electronic communication, and primitive nuclear technology. No energy shields, no faster-than-light capability, no atmospheric manipulation. Their largest weapons could barely damage our smallest scout ship. Zalthek's interest waned further. The Empire preferred worlds with at least some technological sophistication. It made integration easier when the conquered species could contribute something useful. Physical characteristics? Velira's patches dimmed slightly, indicating confusion. That's where the data becomes peculiar. These humans appear to be one of the most fragile species we've encountered. Therawire, main display shifted to show captured images of humans in their natural environment. Zalthek studied the strange bipedal creatures with their dry skin and rigid internal skeletons. Unlike the Zephyrians' flexible cartilaginous frames that could compress to survive in the deepest ocean trenches, these beings seemed impossibly brittle. They lack any form of natural armor, Velira continued. Their skin tears easily. Their bones break under minimal pressure. They cannot survive temperature variations of more than a few degrees without artificial assistance. Most remarkably, they require constant atmospheric support. Atmospheric support? Yes, Commander. They must continuously breathe a specific gas mixture to survive. Remove this mixture for even a few minutes and they die. They cannot hold their breath for extended periods like we can. They cannot absorb dissolved gases through their skin. They are completely dependent on their planet's atmosphere. Zalthek's chromatophores shifted to show amusement. In the depths of Zephyria Prime, his people could survive for hours without breathing, absorbing what they needed through specialized skin cells. The idea of such atmospheric dependence seemed almost pathetic. Continue, he commanded. Their mobility is severely limited. They cannot swim efficiently due to their dense bone structure. They move slowly on land using only 2 limbs. Their reaction times are sluggish compared to most sentient species. They lack natural weapons, no claws, no venomous secretions, no bioelectric discharge capabilities. The science officer paused, her bioluminescent patches flickering through a sequence that indicated professional bewilderment. Commander, I've studied hundreds of species across the galaxy. I've never encountered sentience this poorly adapted for survival. By all biological metrics, they should have been eliminated by natural selection long ago. Zalthek found this increasingly puzzling. The galaxy was full of harsh worlds that produced tough, resourceful species. How had such fragile creatures achieved sentience and technological development? Perhaps their world is unusually gentle? That's another anomaly, Velira replied, manipulating her controls to display Earth's environmental data. Their planet experiences extreme weather variations, geological instability, and is populated by numerous predator species that should easily overwhelm humans. Yet somehow they've become the dominant life form. The display showed images of Earth's diverse ecosystems, vast deserts, frozen polar regions, dense jungles teeming with life. Zalthek observed massive creatures that dwarfed the humans, others with obvious predatory adaptations, and environmental conditions that would challenge even Zephyrian colonists. How do they survive in such conditions with their physical limitations? Tool use, Velira answered. They compensate for their biological deficiencies through technology. Artificial shelters, protective clothing, vehicles for transportation, weapons for defense. They've essentially built an external exoskeleton using manufactured items. Clever in a primitive way, Zalthik acknowledged, but hardly threatening to the Empire. His aide, a younger Zephyrian named Cathara, approached the command station. Her chromatophores displayed the formal patterns of a junior officer requesting permission to speak. Yes, Cathara? Commander, I've been reviewing the atmospheric composition data. There's something unusual about their planet's air mixture that might explain their apparent weakness. Zalthik gestured for her to continue. Earth's atmosphere contains exceptionally high levels of oxygen, approximately 21%. Most inhabited worlds maintain oxygen levels between 8 and 12%. Higher concentrations are generally considered toxic to biological systems. And this affects the humans how? I'm not entirely certain, sir. Our xenobiology databases don't contain extensive information about species that evolved in such oxygen-rich environments. It's possible that this atmospheric composition has influenced their evolutionary development in ways we don't fully understand. Valera's patches pulsed dismissively. High oxygen or not, the humans remain physically inferior. Their own planetary records show that they damage easily, age rapidly, and die from diseases that wouldn't affect hardier species. Some of their military conflicts show individual humans being incapacitated by single projectile impacts. Zalthik nodded thoughtfully. The Empire's standard conquest protocol involved atmospheric manipulation to force surrender. Most species became compliant when their air supply was threatened. Given human dependence on their specific atmospheric mixture, they should surrender almost immediately. Very well, he decided. Classify them as Category 7, negligible threat. Recommend minimal force allocation for conquest. A single atmospheric processor should be sufficient to force their surrender. Understood, Commander. Valera confirmed, already preparing the official assessment report. As the senior staff dispersed to their duties, Cathara lingered at her station, studying the human data with growing curiosity. Something about the readings troubled her, though she couldn't articulate exactly what. The oxygen levels were indeed unusual, but there was something else in the atmospheric analysis that seemed significant. She pulled up comparative evolutionary studies from the Empire's xenobiology archives. Species that evolved in harsh environments typically developed robust physical characteristics: thick hides, redundant organ systems, efficient metabolisms. Yet humans appeared to have evolved in the opposite direction, becoming more fragile and dependent. Unless, she thought, their environment wasn't harsh in the way the Empire understood harshness. What if the high oxygen concentration created a different type of evolutionary pressure? What if human fragility was actually an adaptation to something else entirely? Cathara made a note to herself to request more detailed atmospheric analysis data. Her scientific instinct suggested that the Empire might be missing something important about these humans. But with the species classified as negligible threat, it was unlikely that anyone would approve extended research resources. The blue planet continued its slow rotation on the main display, its swirling white clouds hiding secrets that the Zephyrian Empire was confident they already understood. In the depths of space, conquest plans moved forward based on the assumption that humans were exactly what they appeared to be: weak, fragile, and easily subdued. The Empire had never been wrong about such assessments before. 3 cycles later, the Zephyrian invasion fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Commander Zalthik floated before the massive tactical display, watching as his ships moved into position around the small blue planet. The operation was scheduled to take less than 1 local day. Begin standard atmospheric manipulation, he ordered. Target oxygen reduction to 8%. That should incapacitate the humans within minutes while keeping them alive for processing. Valera operated her controls with practiced efficiency. Atmospheric processors deploying, Commander. Initial oxygen extraction beginning. Now. Across Earth's surface, massive machines materialized in the skies above major population centers. The Zephyrian technology was silent and efficient, designed to alter planetary atmospheres without causing panic. Most species simply grew drowsy and confused as their air supply changed, making resistance impossible. Human communication networks are reporting the atmospheric changes, reported the communications officer. Increased chatter on all frequencies. Expected, Zalthik replied. They'll realize resistance is futile once the weakness begins. But the first reports from the surface teams were not what anyone expected. Commander, came the voice of Ground Leader Morith through the communication system. The humans are not responding as predicted. Zalthek's chromatophores shifted to show mild annoyance. Clarify. Sir, we've reduced oxygen levels by 15% in the target zones. According to our projections, the humans should be unconscious or near unconscious by now. Instead, they're fighting. The main display switched to surface feeds from the invasion points. Zalthek watched in growing confusion as human military forces engaged his ground troops with determined aggression. The humans moved with purpose, their weapons fire accurate despite the altered atmosphere. How is this possible? He demanded. Valera checked her readings twice before responding. Sir, atmospheric composition in the target zones is now at 18% oxygen. The humans should be experiencing severe respiratory distress. On the screens, human soldiers advanced on Zephyrian positions using coordinated tactics. Some carried primitive breathing apparatus, but many fought without any atmospheric assistance at all. More disturbing, they didn't seem significantly weakened by the reduced oxygen. Ground Leader Morith, report your casualties, Zalthek commanded. 12 wounded, 4 killed, Commander. The humans are using explosive projectile weapons and chemical accelerants. Their tactics are primitive but effective. They're showing no signs of surrender. Zalthek felt a chill run through his gill slits. 4 Zephyrian soldiers killed? By primitives who should barely be able to breathe? He'd expected 0 casualties in what should have been a simple occupation. Increase atmospheric processing, he ordered. Reduce oxygen to 12%. Sir, Valera warned. That level might cause permanent damage to the human population. Then they should surrender quickly. The atmospheric processors hummed with increased power, drawing more oxygen from Earth's air. Across the planet, humans began experiencing the effects more severely. Emergency broadcasts filled the communication channels as governments struggled to understand what was happening. But the resistance didn't weaken. If anything, it intensified. Commander, Morith's voice carried an edge of panic. The humans are adapting. They're creating sealed environments, using industrial oxygen supplies, even sharing breathing apparatus between soldiers. And, sir, the ones still fighting without assistance are showing no significant decrease in combat effectiveness. Zalthek stared at the tactical displays in disbelief. At 12% oxygen, the humans should be barely conscious. Yet reports flooded in of continued resistance from all landing zones. Human aircraft still flew attack missions. Ground forces maintained organized defensive positions. Some facilities had gone into complete atmospheric lockdown, becoming small fortresses that his troops couldn't easily breach. How long can they maintain this? He asked Valera. Unknown, sir. Our xenobiology database has no comparable examples. Most species would have surrendered hours ago. On the main screen, Zalthek watched a group of human soldiers assault one of his armored positions. They moved with grim determination, even though some were clearly struggling with the reduced oxygen. When one soldier collapsed, others immediately shared their breathing equipment and continued the attack. Sir, reported the fleet tactical officer, human military forces are requesting communication. Put them through. The screen filled with the image of a human male wearing what appeared to be a military uniform. His breathing was labored, but his eyes showed clear intelligence and absolute determination. Alien, Commander, the human said in accented but understandable galactic standard. I am General Patterson of the United Earth Defense Force. We know you're reducing our oxygen levels. We know you expect us to surrender. We won't. Zalthek activated his translator. Human General, your resistance is futile. Your species cannot survive without proper atmospheric support. Surrender now and we will restore normal oxygen levels. The human's expression hardened. You clearly don't understand humans very well. We've lived through ice ages, plagues, world wars, and natural disasters that would wipe out most species. A little thin air isn't going to stop us. Your people are suffering, Zalthek pointed out, gesturing to reports of human distress across the planet. Yes, they are, Patterson agreed. And they're fighting anyway. That should tell you something about what you're dealing with. The communication ended, leaving Zalthek staring at a blank screen. Around him, his command staff exchanged uncertain glances. This wasn't how conquests were supposed to proceed. Sir, Kethara approached hesitantly. Permission to analyze the surface combat data? Granted. I want to understand why these humans aren't behaving according to prediction. As the battle reports continued streaming in, a disturbing pattern emerged. Human endurance was far greater than anticipated. Their reaction times, while slower than Zephyrian standard, remained consistent even under atmospheric stress. Most puzzling, some humans seemed to actually become more aggressive as the oxygen levels dropped, fighting with a desperation that made them increasingly dangerous. "Commander," Velera announced, "we're receiving casualty reports from all ground teams. Human resistance has resulted in 43 Zephyrian wounded and 16 killed. 16 killed. Against primitives who should be gasping for breath. Ground Leader Morith, implement Phase 2 protocols. Deploy atmospheric containment fields and begin direct assault on population centers." "Sir," Morith's voice was strained. "Recommend caution. The humans they're not what we expected. I've never seen a species fight this hard under these conditions. They're treating this as a war of extinction." Zalthek's chromatophores flickered through patterns of frustration and growing concern. The operation that should have taken hours was now entering its second day with no sign of human surrender. His forces were taking casualties against opponents who shouldn't even be conscious. Something was very wrong with their assessment of human capabilities. The fragile, dependent species described in their initial reports was nowhere to be found. Instead, they faced an enemy that seemed to grow more determined as conditions worsened. "Velera, I want a complete reanalysis of human physiology. Focus on their adaptation to atmospheric stress." "Yes, sir." "Should I also request reinforcements?" Zaltek looked at the tactical display showing the ongoing battle across Earth's surface. Human forces were taking heavy losses but giving no ground. Some were fighting effectively at oxygen levels that should have rendered them unconscious. "Yes," he admitted reluctantly. "Request additional ground forces, and tell them to bring atmospheric suits. Something tells me we're going to need them." The invasion that was supposed to be a simple occupation had become something else entirely. The Empire faced an enemy that didn't follow the rules of conquest, didn't surrender when logic demanded it, and fought with an intensity that suggested they would rather die than submit. For the first time in his military career, Commander Zalthek began to question whether the Empire truly understood the species they were trying to conquer. Dr. Kethera floated in her laboratory aboard the research vessel Depthwalker, surrounded by holographic displays showing atmospheric composition data from Earth. The battle had been raging for 5 days now, and the humans showed no signs of surrender despite oxygen levels being reduced to 10% across most of the planet. She had volunteered for this assignment when Commander Zalthek requested a full scientific analysis of human physiology. Something about their resistance patterns defied everything the Empire knew about atmospheric dependency in sentient species. "Computer, display comparative atmospheric requirements for all known sentient species," she commanded. The hologram shifted to show a three-dimensional chart. Dozens of species were represented, their optimal oxygen ranges clearly marked. The highest requirement belonged to the Vorthon Empire at 14%. Most species, including the Zephyrians, operated comfortably between 6 and 10% oxygen. Now overlay human atmospheric data. A red marker appeared on the chart, so far to the right that it almost seemed like an error. 21% oxygen. The number was so extreme that Cathara had initially assumed it was a measurement mistake. "Computer, verify Earth atmospheric readings." Verification complete. Earth atmospheric composition, 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, trace gases. Readings confirmed across multiple measurement points and time periods. Kithara's chromatophores pulsed with scientific excitement mixed with concern. She pulled up the biological data from captured human specimens and battlefield observations. What she saw challenged fundamental assumptions about evolutionary biology. "Fascinating," she whispered to herself. "They don't just tolerate this oxygen concentration. They require it." She began cross-referencing the data with evolutionary models. High oxygen environments were typically associated with larger, more robust life forms, not smaller, seemingly fragile ones. Yet humans had evolved in an atmosphere that would be toxic to most galactic species. Her communication panel chimed. "Dr. Kethera, this is Commander Zalthek. What's your initial assessment?" "Commander, I need more time for a complete analysis, but the preliminary findings are unexpected. Human physiology is far more complex than our initial scans suggested." "Explain." Kethara manipulated her displays to show cellular analysis data. "Sir, human blood carries oxygen at concentrations that would cause cellular damage in most species. Their respiratory system is designed to process atmospheric oxygen at levels we consider dangerous, but they appear weak and fragile. That's what's so intriguing, Commander. They appear fragile because they're adapted to an environment that would kill most of us. It's like studying a species that evolved to live inside a star and concluding they're weak because they can't survive in normal space. She pulled up metabolic comparison charts. Look at these energy consumption patterns. Human cellular respiration operates at efficiency levels we thought were theoretically impossible. They're essentially running controlled combustion reactions at the cellular level. I don't understand. If they're so well adapted, why do they seem so dependent on atmospheric support? Because they are dependent, sir, but not in the way we initially thought. They need their high oxygen atmosphere the same way we need our high-pressure water environment. Remove a Zephyrian from pressurized water and we appear fragile too. Cathara began pulling up historical data from the invasion. Commander, I want to show you something disturbing. Look at human performance data from the battlefield. The display showed comparative analysis of human combat effectiveness at different oxygen levels. At 21%, humans performed at baseline. At 18%, they showed mild degradation. At 15%, noticeable but not crippling effects. At 12%, they were still combat effective, though clearly struggling. Sir, at 12% oxygen, most galactic species would be unconscious or dead. Humans are still fighting, but our atmospheric processors have reduced levels to 10% in some areas. Yes, and that's where the data becomes truly alarming. Cathara highlighted specific battlefield reports. At 10% oxygen, humans are experiencing severe physiological stress, but many are still functional. Some are even showing increased aggression levels, as if the oxygen deprivation is triggering some kind of survival response. Commander Zaltek's image on the communication screen showed his chromatophores shifting to patterns of confusion. Are you suggesting that humans are stronger than we initially assessed? I'm suggesting that we completely misunderstood what we were looking at, sir. Human weakness is relative to their own extreme environment. It's like observing deep-sea creatures at ocean depth and concluding they're weak because they can't survive in shallow water. Cathara pulled up theoretical projections. Commander, I've been running calculations on human performance in standard galactic atmospheric conditions. The results are concerning. Show me. The hologram displayed a three-dimensional model of human physiology with various atmospheric compositions. As the oxygen percentage decreased from Earth normal to galactic standard, projected human capabilities increased dramatically. At standard galactic oxygen levels of 8%, human metabolic efficiency would increase by approximately 40%. Their strength-to-weight ratio would improve significantly. Reaction times would likely accelerate. Endurance would be extraordinary by galactic standards. That seems impossible. It gets worse, sir. These are conservative estimates based on known human physiology. I suspect the reality could be far more extreme. Cathara's scientific excitement was now tinged with genuine fear. Commander, we may have made a fundamental error in our threat assessment. She displayed cellular analysis data from human blood samples. Look at this oxygen carrying capacity. Human blood can transport oxygen at concentrations that would cause explosive cellular damage to Zephyrian tissue. They've evolved to manage what amounts to controlled cellular combustion. Dr. Cathara. Commander Zaltek's voice carried a note of urgency. Are you telling me that humans operating in normal galactic atmospheric conditions would be enhanced? Sir, I'm telling you that humans operating in our atmosphere would be like Zephyrians operating with perfect pressure and unlimited water supply. They wouldn't just be enhanced. They'd be optimized. The implications settled over both of them like a cold current. The humans' apparent atmospheric dependency wasn't a weakness. It was evidence of adaptation to an environment so extreme that it had forged them into something unprecedented. There's more, Commander. I've been analyzing human evolutionary history. They didn't evolve in a gentle environment. Earth has experienced multiple extinction events, ice ages and environmental catastrophes. Yet humans not only survived, they thrived and became the dominant species, while breathing poison. While breathing what most species would consider poison, yes, sir. And they did it while competing with predators that should have easily eliminated such apparently fragile creatures. Cathara pulled up images of Earth's wildlife. Look at some of the species humans coexisted with during their development. Massive predators, environmental extremes, natural disasters. Yet humans survived and eventually dominated their planet. How is that possible if they're as fragile as they appear? Because they're not fragile in their environment, sir. They only appear fragile when removed from it. It's like studying Zephyrians in a desert and concluding we're weak because we can't survive without water. Commander Zaltek was quiet for a long moment. Dr. Kethera, I want you to run projections on human combat capabilities in standard ship atmosphere. I also want theoretical assessments of human performance in various galactic standard environments. Sir, some of those calculations might be disturbing. Do them anyway. The Empire needs to understand exactly what we're dealing with. As Kethera began her calculations, she felt a growing sense of unease. The humans weren't just surviving the atmospheric manipulation, they were adapting to it. And if her theories were correct, the Empire might have awakened something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. The species they had dismissed as weak and dependent was beginning to look like the galactic equivalent of creatures that had evolved to breathe fire and somehow mistook their adaptation to that environment as frailty. She hoped her calculations would prove her wrong. But the data was suggesting something that challenged every assumption about biological limitations in the known galaxy. Dr. Kethara stared at her computer display in disbelief. She had run the calculations 3 times, checking every variable, every assumption, every piece of data. The results remained the same, and they were terrifying. Computer confirmed projection parameters for human physiology in standard galactic atmosphere. Confirmed. Parameters: oxygen concentration 8%, nitrogen 70%, carbon dioxide 1%, trace gases 21%. Standard pressure and temperature maintained. Display projected human capabilities. The hologram that appeared before her showed a human figure, but the performance statistics attached to it seemed impossible. According to her calculations, a human operating in standard galactic atmosphere would possess physical capabilities that exceeded every known sentient species. Her communication panel chimed urgently. "Dr. Kethara," came Commander Zaltek's voice, "I need your report immediately. The situation on the surface has become critical. Sir, I have preliminary results, but I strongly recommend independent verification before—" "Doctor, we don't have time for extended verification. Ground Leader Morith reports that humans are now fighting effectively at 8% oxygen." 8%! I need to know what we're dealing with. Kethara's chromatophores flickered with anxiety. "Commander, the results are difficult to accept. I believe we may have made the most serious threat assessment error in Empire history." "Explain." She took a deep breath of her tank's oxygenated water and began. "Sir, humans aren't weak. They're operating under extreme environmental pressure that masks their true capabilities. Earth's atmosphere is essentially a high-energy, high-oxidation environment that would kill most galactic species." "I understand that part. What does it mean for our invasion?" "Commander, imagine a Zephyrian forced to live in shallow, low-pressure water for their entire evolutionary history. They would appear weak and fragile compared to our deep-water capabilities, correct?" "Obviously. Now imagine that same Zephyrian return to optimal depth and pressure. They would demonstrate abilities that shallow-water species couldn't match." "Sir, humans are the deep-water Zephyrians of atmospheric breathing." Kethara manipulated her display to show the complete analysis. "According to my calculations, humans operating in standard galactic atmosphere would experience a metabolic efficiency increase of 60%. Their strength would improve by an estimated 40%. Their endurance would become extraordinary by any galactic standard." "Those numbers seem impossible." "I thought so too, sir. But the math is consistent. Humans evolved to operate in what amounts to a controlled combustion environment. Their cellular respiration systems are designed to handle oxygen concentrations that would cause explosive cellular damage to other species." She pulled up comparative evolutionary data. "Sir, look at human evolutionary history. They didn't just survive in their oxygen-rich environment, they dominated it. They outcompeted species that were larger, stronger, and better armed. They survived multiple global extinction events. They built civilizations while breathing what most species would consider poison." "Dr. Kethara," Commander Zalthek's voice carried a note of growing alarm, "are you telling me that humans have been fighting our invasion while operating at reduced capacity?" "Yes, sir. They've been fighting us while essentially suffocating, and they're still fighting effectively at oxygen levels that would kill most galactic citizens." The communication line was quiet for several moments. When the commander spoke again, his voice was strained. "Doctor, run immediate projections on human combat capabilities if they were to operate in our ship environments." Cathara's fingers trembled as she input the parameters. Ship atmosphere was optimized for Zephyrian physiology. 8% oxygen, high humidity, moderate pressure. For humans, it would be like receiving a massive performance enhancement. The results that appeared made her gill slits freeze. "Commander," she whispered, "a human operating in ship atmosphere would possess approximately 3 times the strength of a Zephyrian warrior. Their reaction times would be 40% faster than our quickest soldiers. Their endurance would be essentially unlimited by our standards. That can't be correct. Sir, I've verified these calculations repeatedly, but there's more. Human blood chemistry in low oxygen environments would become incredibly efficient. Their healing rates would accelerate. Their cognitive function would actually improve due to optimized cellular respiration." Cathara pulled up additional data. "Commander, I analyzed the battlefield recordings where humans were fighting at reduced oxygen levels. The ones who appeared to be struggling weren't dying, they were adapting. Their bodies were adjusting to the new atmospheric conditions. Adjusting how? Their respiratory rates increased, their circulation improved, their muscle efficiency adapted. Sir, humans weren't just surviving our atmospheric manipulation, they were beginning to optimize for it." She displayed metabolic data from captured human soldiers. "Look at these readings. Humans exposed to reduced oxygen for extended periods were showing improved performance in areas that required endurance and sustained effort. They were literally becoming more dangerous the longer the battle continued." Commander Zalthek's image showed his chromatophores cycling through patterns of disbelief and growing horror. "Doctor, you're describing a species that becomes stronger under adverse conditions." "Yes, sir. But it's worse than that. I ran historical analysis on human conflict behavior. They have a documented pattern of becoming more effective fighters when their survival is threatened. The more desperate their situation becomes, the more dangerous they are." Cathara displayed human military history. "Look at their past conflicts. Humans consistently perform at their highest levels when facing extinction-level threats. They call it fighting with their backs to the wall. Our invasion has essentially triggered their optimal combat psychology. So we're facing a species that gets stronger as we try to weaken them, and more determined as we threaten them," Cathara confirmed. "Sir, human psychology appears to be optimized for survival under extreme stress. The atmospheric manipulation isn't just failing to break their will, it's activating their most dangerous behavioral patterns." She pulled up the most disturbing calculation of all. "Commander, I ran projections on what would happen if humans were to operate in the Empire's standard environmental conditions for extended periods. Show me." The hologram displayed a timeline showing projected human adaptation to galactic standard atmosphere. Within weeks, they would be operating at peak efficiency. Within months, their physical capabilities would exceed our best warriors. Within a year or two what? Sir, within a year or two of living in our atmospheric conditions, humans would essentially become the most physically capable species in known galactic space. They would be faster, stronger, and more enduring than anything in our databases. The implications crashed over both of them like a tidal wave. The Empire hadn't encountered a weak species. They had found creatures so adapted to extreme conditions that their normal environment masked their true potential. "Dr. Cathara," Commander Zalthek said slowly, "are you telling me that humans are essentially biological weapons that evolved to operate in a controlled combustion environment?" "Sir, I'm telling you that humans are what happens when evolution optimizes a species for an environment that would kill most galactic life forms. They appear weak because they're operating under conditions that would be lethal to us. And if those conditions were removed? Commander, we would be facing the most dangerous species the Empire has ever encountered. They wouldn't just be a threat, they would be unstoppable." Cathara's final calculation appeared on the display, a projection of human capabilities in optimal galactic conditions. The numbers defied belief, but the mathematics was solid. "Sir," she said quietly, "I believe we need to immediately reconsider our approach to this species. We may have made the greatest tactical error in Empire history." Commander Zalthek stared at the data for a long moment. "Doctor, prepare a complete report for High Command. Include everything. And Doctor, recommend immediate withdrawal of all invasion forces." "Sir, we're not fighting a weak species, are we? We're fighting the galactic equivalent of deep-sea predators who somehow learned to walk on land, and we've been trying to defeat them by taking away their pressure suits." As Kithara began preparing her report, she realized that the Empire had not just misunderstood humans, they had awakened something that should have been left alone. High Admiral Threshen floated in the vast command chamber of the Empire's capital ship, her ancient chromatophores barely flickering as she reviewed Dr. Kethara's report for the fourth time. Around her, the High Command waited in tense silence, their bioluminescent patches dim with concentration and growing alarm. "Reread Section 7, she commanded her aide. The young officer's voice echoed through the chamber's bioacoustic systems. Human cellular respiration operates at oxygen concentrations that would cause immediate cellular damage and death in most galactic species. What appears to be atmospheric dependency is actually evidence of adaptation to an environment so extreme that it has produced unprecedented biological capabilities." High Admiral Threshen's gill slits fluttered with anxiety. In 3,000 cycles of galactic expansion, the Empire had never encountered anything like this. Continue with the combat projections. Projected human capabilities in standard galactic atmosphere: strength increase of 60% over baseline, endurance increase of 120%, reaction time improvement of 40%. Projected adaptation time to optimal performance: 14 to 21 standard days. The numbers hung in the water like a death sentence. Fleet Admiral Kolseth, veteran of 40 conquest campaigns, spoke first. "High Admiral, this report suggests we've attempted to invade a species that would be unstoppable if they ever left their planet. Not would be, Admiral. Will be." Threshen called up the latest battle reports from Earth. "They're already adapting. Commander Zalthek reports that human forces are now fighting effectively at 7% oxygen. Some units are showing improved coordination and tactical awareness." Science Admiral Veltara's patterns showed deep concern. "High Admiral, I've had my best xenobiologists review Dr. Kethara's calculations. They're mathematically sound. We may have discovered a species that's essentially been training in a high-gravity, high-energy environment their entire evolutionary history. Explain that assessment." "Ma'am, imagine if our people had evolved in the deepest ocean trenches, at crushing pressures, with limited resources. When brought to normal depth, they would possess capabilities that no shallow water species could match. Humans evolved breathing something that kills most life forms, competing with predators that should have eliminated them, surviving environmental catastrophes that would destroy civilizations." High Admiral Threshen absorbed this information with growing dread. "Admiral Kolseth, what's the current status of our invasion force?" "Requesting immediate withdrawal, High Admiral. Ground Leader Morith reports casualties approaching 30%. Human resistance has not weakened despite 8 days of atmospheric manipulation. If anything, they're becoming more organized and effective. And their adaptation to reduced oxygen? Accelerating, ma'am. Some human units are now operating efficiently at 6% oxygen. Our xenobiologists estimate that within another few days they'll be fighting in conditions that would be optimal for our own forces." The implications were staggering. The Empire had essentially been training their enemies for combat in galactic standard conditions, while simultaneously demonstrating their own technological capabilities. Intelligence Admiral Morin spoke up. "High Admiral, we've intercepted human communications. They're analyzing our technology, studying our tactics, and sharing information about our atmospheric requirements. They know we need specific environmental conditions to operate effectively." "And their response?" "They're preparing counter-atmospheric weapons, ma'am. Chemical agents that would increase oxygen concentration to lethal levels for our forces. They're essentially developing poison gas that would kill us by giving us too much of what we consider toxic." High Admiral Threshen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the water temperature. The humans weren't just resisting, they were learning to fight back using the Empire's own biological weaknesses against them. "Dr. Kethara," she addressed, the scientist directly through the communication link. "What are your recommendations?" "High Admiral, immediate and complete withdrawal. Reclassification of humans as Category 1, extreme threat. Implementation of permanent quarantine protocols around the Sol system." "Based on what assessment?" "Ma'am, humans represent an existential threat to every species in the Empire. They're not just adapted to extreme conditions, they're optimized for survival under stress. Every pressure we apply makes them more dangerous. Kythera's data stream showed terrifying projections. If humans were to achieve spaceflight using our technology, they would possess capabilities that no known species could counter. They would be faster, stronger, more enduring, and more adaptable than anything in galactic space. And their psychological profile? They don't surrender, High Admiral. Their entire evolutionary history shows a species that fights to extinction rather than submit. They view this invasion as an extinction event, which means they'll fight, with absolute determination until either they're dead or we are. Strategic Admiral Zephal had been quiet through the discussion, but now his patterns showed deep analysis. High Admiral, I've been reviewing the tactical implications. If humans were to capture any of our atmospheric technology, they could potentially terraform worlds to their environmental requirements, meaning they could turn any planet into a high-oxygen environment that would be lethal to most galactic species, but optimal for human performance. They could create entire worlds where they would be unstoppable. The final piece of the horrifying puzzle fell into place. The Empire hadn't just encountered a dangerous species. They had found one that could potentially dominate galactic space if they ever achieved advanced technology. There's something else, Dr. Kythera added reluctantly. Analysis of human technological development shows exponential advancement when they're threatened. Their innovation rate increases dramatically under stress. You're saying the invasion is accelerating their technological progress? Yes, ma'am. They're currently reverse engineering our atmospheric processors. Human learning capability under stress conditions appears to be extraordinary. Every day we remain here, they become more capable of understanding and countering our technology. High Admiral Threshen made her decision. All commands, implement immediate withdrawal protocols. All invasion forces are to disengage and return to fleet positions immediately. Yes, High Admiral, came the chorus of responses. Admiral Veltara, I want all references to Earth's location removed from our navigation databases. The Sol system is to be classified as a restricted zone with a minimum approach distance of 50 light-years. Understood, ma'am. Admiral Morin, prepare a priority communication to all Empire worlds and allies. Humans are to be classified as a Category 1 threat species. Any contact with Sol system or human representatives is prohibited. As the orders went out across the fleet, High Admiral Threshen reflected on the magnitude of their error. The Empire had spent millennia conquering species based on careful threat assessment. They had never been wrong before. Dr. Kythera, she called out one final time, for the official record, provide your final assessment of human threat potential. High Admiral, in my professional opinion, humans represent the most dangerous species the galaxy has ever produced. They evolved in an environment that would kill most life forms, developed under pressure that would crush most civilizations, and adapted to conditions that would be considered torture by galactic standards. And if they ever achieved advanced spaceflight, ma'am, if humans ever achieved advanced spaceflight and access to galactic standard atmospheric conditions, they would become an unstoppable force. They wouldn't just threaten the Empire, they would threaten every known civilization. High Admiral Threshen's final order was simple. Effective immediately, the Sol system is designated as a forbidden zone. No Empire vessel is to approach within 50 light-years. Any species that encounters humans is advised to avoid contact and report immediately to High Command. As the Zephyrian fleet disappeared into hyperspace, leaving Earth's blue skies clear for the first time in days, a new entry appeared in the Empire's threat database. Species, human. Classification, Category 1, extreme threat. Avoid at all costs. Notes: biological weapons specialists adapted to lethal atmospheric conditions, capable of becoming galactically dominant if removed from current environmental constraints. Recommend permanent quarantine. Under no circumstances should humans be provided with advanced technology or access to standard galactic atmospheric conditions. This species represents an existential threat to galactic civilization. The Empire had discovered a species they had mistaken for weak was actually the galactic equivalent of creatures that had learned to breathe fire and somehow thought their adaptation to that environment was frailty. They would not make that mistake again. And across the galaxy, a quiet warning spread among the spacefaring civilizations. There is a species in the Sol system that evolved to breathe poison and fight under conditions that would kill most life forms. They call this weakness. Never assume weakness in a species that chose to breathe fire.